afternoon from sunny Johannesburg, South Africa. Passage Church, my family and I love you, and we're so thankful for your prayers and for your support of the ministry and the work we're doing here through the International Mission Board and what we do here. We're also really excited about hosting a team from the Passage Church to come and work alongside us. A lot of what we do is we prayer walk, we share the gospel, and we try to get to discipleship, and we try to work hard. Let me give you an example of how that works. Last year we had a team from another church in North Carolina that came, and we were actually prayer walking through a particular neighborhood. And in the course of that, we met a woman named Melanie. Melanie lives in an area called Jeppystown. And in this area, there's a lot of drugs and a lot of issues in this area. But we were able to start a Bible study that I've had since that time that is on its way to becoming a house church. And so because of the work that you guys can do while being here, it means that we're able to expand the gospel and expand the kingdom in these places. So we would love to see you come join us in the work that we're doing here. We're looking forward very much to seeing you guys. And again, thank you so much for your support of the ministry that we have here. If you'd like to to give us some more information, reach out to Nick or Meredith or Matt, and we'd love to connect with you soon. Thanks so much. Have a great Sunday.
Awesome. So Jonathan was the very first worship pastor that we had at the Passage Church. He was here for 3.5 years before moving to Alabama, there getting married, and there moving over, and then coming back here for a little bit, then moving over to Johannesburg, and has been in Johannesburg for about 1.5 years now. In October the 14th through the 25th, we're taking a team over to Johannesburg. Nick and Meredith are leading that team. I'm going to join in with them and go along with them. So we put Nick's email up there because I don't know any answers. I'm just a team member ready, going to serve the Lord in South Africa, and I just want to put the invitation out there for you to join us. So if you would like more information about this, Nick at the Passage Church is the perfect spot for you to start learning about this trip over to Johannesburg in October. We are fired up about it. I'm fired up about it. Excited to see Jonathan, but more excited to do some work and some ministry together. Hey, this morning, let me tell you, last week, if you weren't here, last week we've been talking for about 6 or 8 weeks about a potential building here on this property. Talked about building a building out in front of this property that would double our worship capacity, that would give us more room to operate and to just fellowship with one another in a lobby space. And it would also secure and enlarge our children's area. And so we voted last week after conversations about this. And so I just want to come today to tell you the results of that vote. We had almost about 80% of Passage Church members participate in this vote, and in the vote, out of the 80% who voted, it passed by over 99%. And so if you're wondering, So if you're wondering, hey, what happened with that? That's what happened, and this is the direction that we're moving together with forward as a church. And we are pumped up about it. We're excited about it. And because of this, we are kind of going to step away from Mark just for a moment, just for about 3 weeks, and enter into a new series called Greater. We're actually going to start a Greater initiative that will run actually over the course of the next couple of years. And as you leave today, you're going to get this little booklet right here. Somebody's going to hand you this thing, and in this, you will get all the information that you would need. Now, this is one per family, and so you will pick up a booklet, and all the information you need to know about the initiative is going to be right here in this booklet. If you lose this, you can come and get another one, or you can just go online, and there will be a link there to all the information, and actually this booklet as well there online. So that's a little bit about what happened last week and where we're headed in the weeks to come. We are pumped up, fired up, excited about all that the Lord is doing among us, and we just can't wait to see what He continues to do. So we're going to start this week in a new series, and like I said, just for a couple of weeks, over in John chapter 3, and then we'll jump right back into Mark chapter 8 in early May. We're going to be in John chapter 3 today. John chapter 3, verse 22. We're going to come back to a individual whom we talked about a little bit during the Mark series, and it is a man named John the Baptist. And here in John chapter 3, verse 22, we see this interaction that John has with some people who are actually following him. Here it is in verse 22. It says, after this, Jesus and his disciples went to the Judean countryside where he spent time with them and was baptized. John was baptizing in Aenon near Siloam because there was plenty of water there. People were coming and being baptized, since John had not yet been thrown into prison. So we talked about this in a series in Mark, that John was eventually thrown into prison because of he spoke out against this marriage that Herod was in. And so because of his speaking out against the marriage, he got thrown in prison. And so this is his situation. So he hadn't lost his head yet. He's still alive. He's not yet been in prison, and he's baptizing people. And he has this interaction. Then a dispute arose between John's disciples and a Jew about purification. So they came to John and told him, "Rabbi, the one you testified about and who was with you across the Jordan is baptizing, and everyone is going to him." So they come to him and go, "Hey, we may have a problem here. The one you were testifying about, the one you're speaking of, he's on the other side, and he's baptizing people, and people are leaving you, and they're going with him." John responded in verse 27. "No one can receive anything unless it's been given to him from heaven. You yourselves can testify that I said, 'I'm not the Messiah, but I've been sent ahead of him.'" So he says, "Hey, remember, this isn't new. I'm not giving you new information with what I'm about to share with you. But remember, I've already told you, I'm not the Messiah. I'm not the promised one. That's not who I am. That is not my identity. I'm just here to be a voice to point to the one who is to come." And this is what he says. Verse 29, "He who has the bride is the groom, and the groom's friend, who stands by and listens for him and rejoices greatly at the groom's voice. So this joy of mine is complete." He's saying, hey, the fact that people are leaving me and going with Jesus, man, that brings joy in my life. The fact that people are leaving me and I'm not baptizing, but they're going to Jesus, that's why I've come. And then look what he says in verse 30. "He must increase. I must decrease." If you have the NIV version, it says, "He must become greater. I must become less." He must become greater. I must become less. Man, I want to get there. When I was younger in college, I was a part of a ministry where we had to kind of get a verse, and we had to share this verse. It was kind of going to be our verse, and kind of the verse that like represented our life. And we wanted this verse to be our life, kind of mark our life, kind of a life verse, if you will. And I landed on John 3:30. "Oh, that he might increase and I might decrease." And it sounds good. But oh man, it's hard. Because sometimes we think that maybe this could happen, that maybe I could increase, and as I increase, Jesus can just increase with me. Right? And there's this culture, even within American Christianity, it's the idea that if I follow Jesus, maybe I'll get some stuff. And while I'm getting some stuff, while I'm getting known, then I'll just point to Jesus and he'll get known at the same time through me increasing. I'll increase and he'll increase, and just me and Jesus together, we'll both increase. It's not what desire of John's heart. It's a follower of Jesus, not the desire of, or ought not be the desire of our hearts. And as a church, it ought not be the desire of our church. But our desire ought to be that we would decrease and that he would increase. Here's a picture. My hope is this hourglass will kind of get marked on your mind and just a reminder of John 3:30. Because when you turn over the hourglass, notice what's not happening. Both parts of the hourglass cannot simultaneously rise, right? One is empty so that the other may increase. One is decreasing and the other is increasing. The prayer of John in John 3:30, and I think mine and ours collectively together ought to be, Lord, you take our lives and you decrease us. Oh, so that you might so that you might increase. God, that may we be less known so that you might be known. This is the heart of John. This is our heart. But you know what? Here's the deal. This is not the natural bent of an individual. Right? You're natural. You don't drift towards a he must become greater, I must become less mindset. You don't naturally drift that way. Matter of fact, you naturally drift the other way. You actually, as a young child, have already kind of started to drift that way pretty heavily. Right? Think about the vocabulary of young children. That's mine. Right? Hey, watch me. Watch me. Right? When's it going to be my turn? Right? The vocabulary we think of children of mine, watch me, my turn, just reminds us that the natural bent of the human heart is not to a he must become greater or he must increase and I must decrease or I must become less mindset. It's actually the opposite. And so this morning, what I want us to do to kind of kick off this series with John 3:30 in mind, kind of just ask ourselves three questions. Three questions that we see John clearly answered throughout his life. And the first question is this: in what is my identity rooted? In what is my identity rooted? See, John knew who he was and John knew who he was not. People would come to him, they'd ask him, they say, are you the Christ? He said, no. Are you Elijah? He said, Are you a prophet? No. Well, who are you? I'm just a voice. I'm just a voice of one. I'm just the guy pointing to the guy. That's who I am. And by saying this, what's he communicating? Jesus says he's the bread of life. I'm not that. I'm not the light of the world. I am not the good shepherd. I am not the way, the truth, and the life. Right? I am not the true vine. That is not who I am. See, John knew his identity. He knew who he was, and he had opportunity as he would come to him to assume an identity of whom he was not in order that more people might know who he is or that somehow he might push his name. But John, understanding who he was and understanding where his identity and how it was rooted in God, said, no, that's not who I am. That's not my responsibility. My responsibility is just to be a pointer to the one who is. And see, this temptation to make a name for ourselves isn't new. It didn't come along with social media. Right? We have a lot of people out there who were totally content with not being known until social media comes and exposes in us all of our desires to be known by more people. That it didn't come along then. Matter of fact, we see it, that this desire to be known, this desire to sit in the seat of God, this desire to assume a different identity than the one we've been given. We see it all the way back in Genesis chapter 3. In Genesis chapter 3, we see this unfold where the serpent comes to Adam and Eve. And when he's trying to tempt them, here's what he's tempting them with. Hey, if you eat this fruit, you'll be like God. That's what's on the table. You eat this fruit, you're going to know like God knows. You and God will be on a level playing field if you just do this. See, this idea that hey, there is something out there that God may be withholding from me and I can get kind of even or level with God is the next move in my life. It is not new to us, but we see it all the way back in Genesis chapter 3. We see it in Genesis chapter 11. In the Tower of Babel account, there are people that are rallying together. And God told them to scatter, but they're choosing to gather. He's telling them to go, and they're choosing to stay. And they get together and they make this plan. They say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to build a tower so big. And the purpose of this tower serves one purpose. Not better cell phone reception. It is one purpose. The purpose of this tower is that people will see us and they will know our name. I want to be known. I want to be known. I want to have my identity rooted in something. John the Baptist was content to have his identity rooted in who he was in God. He was content to be the pointer to the one who was to come. John the Baptist understood that what is better than having a name among the people is attaching my name to the name that is above every name. The name that which every knee shall bow and every tongue will confess. See, that's far better than having a name for myself. But we don't quite get this as a culture. Back in about 6 months ago, 7 months ago, Instagram, the social media platform, decided they were going to start charging for blue check marks. And if you're new to social media, if you don't know about blue check marks is like the verification. It's like, hey, you're somebody, right? The blue check mark is saying, hey, people know you and you're important. And they were going to start charging for a blue check mark to verify and to kind of bring some validity to your account. But really, with that came also this idea of a blue check mark says, hey, pay attention to me. And so they do this August of 2023, and they said, we're going to charge $15 a month. And the first 24 hours that they roll this out, they have 44 million people sign up for a blue check mark. Pretty good business marketing scheme, right? Over $660 million was earned in 24 hours because people said, man, people got to know I'm real. Man, people got to know I matter. People got to see the blue check mark. Now, I'm sure there were businesses that had to have it, or there are other companies that had, but I would guess the majority of our 44 million were individuals who are saying, man, I need to make a name. I want to be known. I was listening to a podcast recently of a comedian who was sharing about, he was a comedian that for several years ago was popular in the church community, and he ended up in rehab for some addiction. And he talks about being in a rehab facility in Mississippi and being big within the church community. He says, hey, can we go to church this week? And they're like, yeah, when people are going to go to church, we normally go to this church. Here's the church we go to. Now, he knew that was a smaller church, and he knew that his comedy probably wasn't big among that group of people. So he goes to the person who runs the rehab facility. He says, no, I tell you what, can we, I tell you what, this church is more like the church I go to. Can we go to this church instead? And what he admits on that podcast was this, is that was a church that was much larger. That was a church that was more filled with people of his demographic that might recognize him and know who he was. And he said, and I asked to go to that church not because I had a desire to worship. I just had a desire to be known. He said, I wanted the guys in rehab to know that I was a somebody. And he says, they walk into the church service, and sure enough, he don't get past the greeter before the greeter says, hey, I know you. And all walks in, and everybody says, oh, look, he's here. And people are coming over to take pictures with him. People are coming over to talk to him. And why is he there? He's there because he desires a name, because he wants to be known, because his identity is rooted in something else other than Jesus. Where's your identity rooted? John says, yeah, I had the opportunity. But no, my identity is rooted in who God has created me to be. The second thing is this, am I consumed with the glory of God? Am I consumed with the glory of God? What happens when John begins to lose some of his following? He celebrates it, and he rejoices in it, and he says, my joy is now complete. My joy is now full. That Jesus gets glory out of my life brings ultimate joy into my life. The reality that Jesus, through the life that I live, through the message that I preach, that Jesus gets exalted, that's a factor of joy for me. That he's consumed with the glory of God in his life. And then he goes on in the text, right before that on the text, he gives us this example where he says it's kind of like, my job is kind of like the job of a best man in a wedding. Right, the job of the best man is to kind of keep track of the rowdy groomsmen, right? Keep that crew under control. Keep track of the rings, right? Kind of make sure people are where they need to be, standing where they need to be, showing up the time they need to be there, kind of making arrangements, make sure everybody's got a place to change and food to eat and so many different responsibilities with the best man. And their job is to get the bride connected to the groom. It'd be kind of weird if the best man thought their job was to get themselves connected to the bride, right? That wedding has gone off the rails. It's ridiculous. What John is saying here, I wouldn't live a life where I would desire the glory of man for myself, where glory is only intended for God. He communicates that there is one coming after me, and here's what he says about him, whose sandals I'm not worthy to untie. says, I want to live my life for the glory of God. Are you and I consumed with the glory of God? And the third thing is this: do I prioritize? Do I prioritize the mission of God in my life? Do I prioritize the mission of God? There's something interesting when you kind of study through the life of John that continually people are always asking, who are you? Right? We already said, are you Elijah? No. Are you the Christ? Are you a prophet? No. And he notice something about John is that he never responds with who he is. Right? Like he never says, are you Elijah? No. You don't know me? My name's John the Baptist. A lot of people know me. I'm kind of a big deal. Matter of fact, I've been in the woods baptizing a whole bunch of people. You ought to know who I am. This is my name. This is who I am. He never pushes back. Never tells us who he is. Matter of fact, the only thing that John says about himself is this: I'm just a voice. That's what I am. I'm just a voice pointing to the one you ought to follow. I am not the one you should follow. He is consumed by the mission of God with his life. He prioritized the mission of God in his life, and it cost him his life. Prioritizing the mission of God and prioritizing the word of God eventually is what landed John the Baptist in jail, and it's what eventually led to his death, to his beheading. Was a sold-out commitment that prioritized the glory of God and the mission of God and the word of God before people who didn't care about God, and it led to his death. He said, man, with everything I am, I'm going to prioritize this mission. And with every breath I have, I'm going to point and I'm going to say, look, here comes the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. So I'm not living for my name. I'm living for another who is far greater than me. Here's the deal. Everyone lives for some name. A lot of you live for your own name. Some of us might live for a company name. Some of us might live for our children's name. Some might live for the name of the significant other. And when I say that, you prioritize what you do and how you live by the name in which you live for. And just think about your schedule. Think about your life. Think about the places you go and the things that you do. And what do those things reflect about the name by whom you seek to live for? John the Baptist says, I'm giving everything I've got. That I will not live for my own name. I'm living for another name. See, there's already a hero in the Bible, and we don't need another one. And John the Baptist gets it. And he surrenders himself fully to say, hey, I want to live for the mission of God. Several years ago, when Lance Armstrong was big in the cycling world, and Lance Armstrong is a name that we know and are familiar with. He's a face that we know. Maybe you had, one of his yellow bracelets that he used to wear. Here's a picture of Lance. You could probably pick out which one of those is Lance, right? And what you don't know, probably you look at that picture, oh yeah, that's a picture of Lance Armstrong. But what about the guy on the right? Do we know the name of the guy on the right? Well, I do, because of research, right? Not because I saw a picture and I'll say, oh yeah, that's George. That's George Hincapie. I know George. No, George, it was not a famous rider. He won 0 Tour de France or de France's. 0. Instead, he was what's called a domestique, which simply means a French word that means servant. Here's the definition. It is one who worked for the benefit of their team, their leader, rather than trying to win the race himself. Here's what George does. When Lance wakes up to train, George wakes up to train. When Lance goes to the dinner table to eat a specific diet so he might be successful in the tour, George eats the diet. When Lance goes into the gym, George goes into the gym. And every time Lance trains and Lance works, he works with George. But George works all the while knowing he'll never get the crown. He knows that the race isn't about him. He is just merely, his role and his job is to serve Lance Armstrong. And in the race, if Lance gets thirsty, it's George's job to pedal as fast as he can, find water, slow it down, and somehow get it to Lance. If Lance's bike gets a flat tire, it's George's bike to hop off his bike, give Lance his, and fix the tire on Lance's bike and figure it out and get going. If Lance gets hungry, it's George's job to slow down, find food, speed up, and get it to Lance. He does all of this every single day, putting forth the work and the effort and the discipline, knowing that it's not him who will ever stand on the podium. And he's completely okay with that. You say, what's it look like to be a follower of Jesus? It's a pretty good picture. It's a pretty good picture that we will sacrifice and that we are willing to practice discipline, and we're willing to lay down our life for the good of the other, of another, knowing that it will never be us who stands on the podium, because the Bible already has a hero and it doesn't need another one. And you will not stand on the podium. But here's the good news. You're not racing. You're not racing so that Christ might win. You're racing knowing Christ has already won. So you're just part of the victory parade. But yet the role remains the same. To lay down our lives, to serve, and to live our lives in such a way that people do not point at us, but they merely point to Christ. That people, that we give our voice and give our life, to live in such a way, to talk in such a way, to do church in such a way, so that people will know who Christ is and what he's done and how that applies into their life. Look, as we close out, we want to do these things individually. We want individually to live our lives in a decreasing manner so that Christ is increasing. We want to live our lives in a way that we are becoming less so that Christ can become more. But we also desire to do it as a church. We also desire as a church for Christ to be greater among us, to be greater in our community, be greater in our state, be greater in our world because of the sacrifices made of the Passage Church. And so with all of this in mind, as we've already talked about the vote for the new building and the change of some things that will be happening around here has already passed. We are entering into this thing called the Greater Initiative. And the Greater Initiative is really got three functions of it. It's got three functions. One is greater discipleship. And that greater discipleship is the idea that we will continue to do all the things that we are doing. We are prioritizing the value and the vision of the Passage Church to say, hey, we want to be and desire to be followers who make followers where he leads and where we live and where he leads. And we want to do that wherever he may call us. We want to continue to do all that we're doing. Second piece is greater impact. That we desire to impact our area in greater ways, that we know and understand that just a simple drive down the street, pick one of them, you get that this area is growing and multiplying in population. And so therefore, in response to that, we recognize that in this space, we've got a few empty seats. Second service, we're going to have far fewer empty seats at 10:30 today. So well done, 9 o'clock, thank you very much. So we're going to build a space that's a little bit larger than the space we currently have. And the third thing is greater legacy. We desire to plant churches. We desire to plant churches that will outlive this church. In the last 5 years, we've been a supporting church of 5 different churches. Supporting church means this, that we give financially to the work of those churches in various places. From Charleston, South Carolina, right, to Washington, D.C., to Raleigh, to Clayton, right? Different places, to Nightdale. We've given in support of various churches, many different churches. But we said, hey, we want to take one step from being a supporting church to being a sending church. That we want to take a step, and you're going to learn more about what that looks like as we walk through this in the next couple weeks. We want to do all of these things all at the same time. And we said, well, how do we do that? And we start by by adopting this greater initiative. And this greater initiative and everything, you will get this book on the way out, and it will give you a lot more information than I'm giving you right now. And if you have questions that the book don't answer, that you still don't understand about what we're doing or what's happening, please, Matt at the Passage Church, I would love to sit down and talk with you. But here's the general idea, is that we would set some financial goals, some financial markers to hit over the next 2 years. And we're not going to ask you to give to each of these 3 things. We're just going to ask you to continue to give as you have been giving, to pray about considering increased giving, to pray about considering maybe beginning to give if you've never given before. And all that information is inside this book, so that we can accomplish all 3 things of these as a church together as we seek to say, hey, Lord, we desire that you would increase in our lives as we decrease. And we desire that also not just individually, but corporately as the Passage Church together. This is the heart of which we have. And so for the next, now 2 weeks, pretty much made it through this one. Good job. We're going to talk about this. We're going to have some conversations about this. And then together at the end, we're going to commit to doing this together. I'm not going to answer every question you have today in that little brief snippet. But I'm going to encourage you to read this, to come back next week and the week after, and be a part of what's happening here in the life of our church. As we seek and as you seek to be people who decrease so that he might increase in and through us. So as we close today, I think that the best way we can close is by remembering the sacrifice of Christ on the cross on our behalf through taking of communion. You see, here's the deal. Because not for the cross and if not for the resurrection, we have no one to point to. If not for the cross and not for the resurrection, we've got no one to point to in our lives. We can't point to one and say, oh, there's one who's greater. Oh, there's one who must increase in our lives. No, but because Jesus came, lived a sinless life on our behalf, went to the cross on our behalf, 3 days later defeated death and rose from the grave, we have a message to proclaim. A message that the whole world needs to hear. And a call of response that we need to invite every single person on the planet into. But one we need to often remember as we walk with the Lord. So today we're going to close with a time of communion. A reminder, this is a time for those in the room who have said, I believe that Jesus is the Son of God who died on the cross for my sins. I put my faith and my trust in him. It's for those in the room who have made that commitment to just remember the sacrifice of Christ through taking of communion. You'll peel back that first layer, and you will take that small wafer that is there, you'll take and eat. And then you'll pull back that second layer, a small cup, and you'll take and you'll drink. Now, we won't do all this together. You'll do this whenever you're ready. Give you some time to pray right where you sit, right where you are. Don't stand up and move to go grab communion just yet. We can do that when we all stand in just a moment. But if you're here and you're a follower of Jesus, we invite you now to join us in this time of communion. If you're here and you're not a follower of Jesus, then we invite you just to stand, to sing, and to consider, who is Jesus? What did he do? And is he worthy of me following him? And if you're ready to take that step today, we invite you to do that. There's a next step card there. I'll be at the front, and we'll be glad to have a conversation with you. Let's pray together.